The desert wind howled across the Afghan mountains, carrying with it the acrid smell of gunpowder and the distant echo of automatic weapons fire. Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez pressed her eye against the scope of her M24 sniper rifle, watching the insurgent compound through the shimmering heat waves. She had been lying motionless in this position for 14 hours, waiting for the perfect shot that could save her trapped platoon below. But what happened next would change everything she thought she knew about warfare, respect, and what it truly means to earn your place among warriors. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had always been different. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she was the daughter of a Marine Corps veteran who taught her to shoot tin cans off fence posts when other girls her age were playing with dolls. Her father, Sergeant First Class Miguel Rodriguez, had served 3 tours in Vietnam and came home with stories that both inspired and haunted him. He saw something special in his daughter, a steadiness under pressure, an analytical mind, and most importantly, the kind of moral compass that military leaders are made of. When Maya announced her intention to join the Army at 18, her father wasn't surprised. What did surprise him was her choice to pursue the most demanding military occupation specialty available to women at the time, military intelligence with a specialization in sniper operations. This was 2003, and female snipers were still a rarity in the U.S. military, viewed with skepticism by many of their male counterparts who questioned whether women had the physical and psychological fortitude for one of warfare's most demanding roles. Maya's journey through basic training at Fort Benning was nothing short of extraordinary. While other recruits struggled with the physical demands and mental pressure, she seemed to thrive. Her drill sergeants quickly noticed that she possessed an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under extreme stress. During live-fire exercises, while her fellow soldiers' hands would shake with adrenaline, Maya's breathing remained controlled, her trigger finger steady as a surgeon's. But it was during advanced marksmanship training that Maya truly began to shine. The Army Sniper School at Fort Benning is notoriously difficult, with a failure rate exceeding 60%. Students are pushed to their absolute limits, both physically and mentally. They must demonstrate not only exceptional shooting ability, but also advanced fieldcraft skills, the ability to remain motionless for extended periods of time, and the psychological resilience to take human life at extreme distances. Maya excelled in every aspect of the training. Her instructors were amazed by her natural ability to read wind patterns, calculate bullet drop over vast distances, and most importantly, her uncanny ability to remain completely still for hours at a time. But what truly set her apart was her tactical intelligence. While other students focused solely on the technical aspects of long-range shooting, Maya understood that sniping was as much about battlefield psychology as it was about marksmanship. She studied the enemy, learning to think like an insurgent fighter. She analyzed patrol patterns, studied the behavioral psychology of combat stress, and developed an almost intuitive understanding of how enemy forces moved and reacted under pressure. Her instructors began to take notice, and by the end of the program, she had not only graduated at the top of her class, but had broken several long-standing marksmanship records. After graduation, Maya was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, one of the Army's most elite units. Even within this prestigious organization, female snipers were virtually unheard of, and Maya found herself facing skepticism and outright hostility from some of her new teammates. Many questioned whether a woman could handle the physical demands of carrying heavy sniper equipment across difficult terrain, or whether she would have the psychological toughness to engage enemy combatants at close range if her position was compromised. Maya's response to this skepticism was simple. She let her performance speak for itself. During training exercises, she consistently outperformed her male counterparts in every measurable category. Her shooting scores were exceptional, her fieldcraft was flawless, and her tactical decision-making was nothing short of brilliant. Slowly but surely, she began to earn the grudging respect of her fellow soldiers. But respect in training is one thing. Respect in combat is something else entirely. Maya knew that she would ultimately be judged not by her performance on the range, but by her actions when lives hung in the balance. That test would come sooner than she expected when her unit received deployment orders to Afghanistan in early 2004. The mission briefing was straightforward but ominous. Intelligence reports indicated increased insurgent activity in the mountainous regions near the Pakistani border. Enemy forces were using the difficult terrain to stage attacks on coalition supply convoys and then melting back into the mountains before air support could respond. Maya's unit was tasked with conducting reconnaissance and interdiction missions designed to disrupt these supply lines and eliminate high-value targets. As their transport aircraft descended through the thin mountain air toward forward operating base Catman, Maya felt the familiar flutter of pre-combat nerves mixed with anticipation. This was what she had trained for, what she had dreamed of since she was a little girl shooting tin cans in her backyard. But as she looked around at the faces of her fellow soldiers, some excited, others apprehensive, all of them wondering what lay ahead, she knew that the real test of her abilities was just beginning. Forward Operating Base Chapman was a stark reminder of the harsh realities of modern warfare. Built into the side of a mountain at an elevation of over 8,000 feet, the base was a collection of prefabricated buildings, concrete barriers, and razor wire that provided a tenuous foothold in some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. The air was thin and cold, even in the middle of summer, and the landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, jagged peaks, deep valleys, and countless hiding places for an enemy that seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. Maya's first few weeks at Chapman were spent acclimatizing to the altitude and getting familiar with the area of operations. The base housed approximately 200 soldiers from various units, including infantry, artillery, intelligence, and special operations forces. It was here that Maya first encountered the man who would become both her greatest challenger and her most important mentor, Lieutenant Colonel James Iron Mike Patterson, the base commander. Patterson was a legend in the Army, a career soldier who had served in every major conflict since Panama in 1989. Standing 6 feet 4 inches with graying hair and steel blue eyes, he commanded respect through a combination of tactical brilliance, unwavering integrity, and an almost mystical ability to inspire soldiers to perform beyond their perceived limitations. He had earned his nickname, Iron Mike, not just for his physical toughness, but for his uncompromising standards in his refusal to accept anything less than excellence from himself or his soldiers. When Patterson first met Maya, his reaction was typical of many senior officers of his generation. He had served in an army that was almost exclusively male, and the idea of female snipers was still foreign to him. However, Patterson was also pragmatic above all else. He cared less about a soldier's gender than about their ability to complete the mission and bring their teammates home alive. Maya's first real test came during a routine patrol in the Korangal Valley, an area that had earned the ominous nickname, the Valley of Death, due to the frequency and intensity of enemy contact. Intelligence reports suggested that insurgent forces were using a network of caves in the valley walls to store weapons and launch attacks on coalition forces. Maya's team was tasked with conducting surveillance and, if the opportunity presented itself, eliminating any high-value targets that might reveal themselves. The patrol began before dawn, with Maya and her spotter, Corporal Danny Williams, moving into an overwatch position on a ridgeline that provided commanding views of the entire valley. Williams was initially skeptical about working with a female sniper, but Maya's professionalism and obvious competence quickly won him over. As they settled into their hide site, a carefully camouflaged position that would conceal them from enemy observation, Williams found himself impressed by Maya's attention to detail and her methodical approach to range estimation and target identification. For 6 hours, they observed the valley through their scopes, noting patterns of civilian movement and identifying potential threat areas. It was tedious work that required absolute concentration and the ability to remain motionless for extended periods of time. Many soldiers found this type of surveillance assignment mentally exhausting, but Maya seemed to thrive in the environment. Her focus never wavered, and she maintained a running commentary of tactical observations that demonstrated her deep understanding of enemy tactics and battlefield psychology. Just after noon, their patience was rewarded. A group of 6 insurgent fighters emerged from a cave system approximately 800 meters away, carrying what appeared to be rocket-propelled grenades and automatic weapons. Maya immediately began her shooting sequence, calculating wind speed and direction, adjusting for the slight uphill angle, and accounting for the thin mountain air that would affect bullet trajectory. "I have 6 military-age males with weapons," Maya whispered into her radio, maintaining the calm professional tone that had become her trademark, requesting permission to engage. The response came back immediately. "Permission granted. Take the shot." Maya's first shot was perfect, a clean hit that dropped the lead insurgent instantly. The remaining fighters scattered, seeking cover among the rocks and attempting to locate the source of the sniper fire. But Maya was already tracking her second target, her breathing controlled and her movements economical and precise. Her second shot found its mark, and then her third. Within 30 seconds, she had eliminated 4 of the 6 insurgents, with the remaining 2 escaping into the cave system. The aftermath of the engagement was revealing. Maya's shooting had been flawless, but what impressed her commanders even more was her post-engagement behavior. While many soldiers, especially on their first combat kills, experienced an adrenaline crash, Maya remained calm and professional, immediately beginning the process of documenting the engagement and preparing for possible follow-up operations. Word of Maya's performance spread quickly through the base. Soldiers who had been skeptical about her abilities began to view her with new respect, and even some of the senior non-commissioned officers who had been openly dismissive of female combat soldiers began to acknowledge her competence. But it was Lieutenant Colonel Patterson's reaction that mattered most. That evening, Patterson called Maya to his office for a debriefing. She expected a routine after-action review, but what she found was a commander who was genuinely impressed by her performance and eager to understand what made her such an effective sniper. "Rodriguez," said Patterson, studying her personnel file, "I've been in this army for 23 years, and I've seen a lot of snipers. Good ones, bad ones, and a few truly exceptional ones. Your performance today puts you in that last category." Maya felt a surge of pride, but maintained her professional composure. "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job." Patterson smiled slightly. "Just doing your job, Rodriguez? You eliminated 4 enemy combatants at extended range in difficult conditions, and you did it with a level of precision and professionalism that would make our best special operations snipers jealous. That's not just doing your job. That's excellence in action." He paused, studying her carefully. "But I'm curious about something. Most soldiers, especially on their first kills, experience some level of psychological reaction. How are you handling it?" Maya considered the question carefully. She had been asking herself the same thing since the engagement ended. Taking human life, even enemy life, was supposed to be traumatic. Military psychologists spend considerable time preparing soldiers for the psychological impact of combat. But Maya found that she felt no guilt, no remorse, no psychological trauma. She felt nothing. Just the satisfaction of a job well done and the knowledge that her actions had potentially saved American lives. "Sir, I feel fine," she said honestly. "I know that might sound cold, but those men were enemy combatants who were preparing to attack coalition forces. Eliminating them was the right thing to do, both tactically and morally." Patterson nodded slowly. This was exactly the kind of psychological toughness that made great snipers, but it was also something that needed to be carefully monitored. Soldiers who were too comfortable with killing could become dangerous, both to the enemy and to their own forces. Over the next several months, Maya's reputation continued to grow. She participated in dozens of combat operations, consistently demonstrating not only exceptional marksmanship, but also tactical intelligence and leadership ability that impressed even the most experienced soldiers. Her kill count steadily rose, but more importantly, her presence on operations seemed to have a psychological effect on enemy forces. Intelligence reports began indicating that insurgent fighters were becoming increasingly reluctant to operate in areas where Maya's unit was known to be active. But with success came new challenges. Maya began to notice subtle changes in how some of her fellow soldiers treated her. While most continued to show her professional respect, others seemed to view her with a mixture of fear and unease. Her ability to kill with such apparent ease, combined with her calm demeanor and obvious competence, made some soldiers uncomfortable. They whispered that she was cold, inhuman, or scary. Maya tried to ignore these comments, but they stung more than she cared to admit. The situation came to a head during a particularly difficult operation in late 2004. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks throughout the region, was planning to meet with his cell leaders in a compound in the Helmand province. Maya's unit was tasked with conducting surveillance and, if possible, eliminating the target. The operation required a nighttime insertion via helicopter into extremely hostile territory. Maya and her team would have to move several kilometers through difficult terrain to reach their overwatch position, establish surveillance, and wait for the target to appear. It was exactly the kind of high-stakes, high-risk mission that separated elite soldiers from the rest. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, but the movement to the target area was more difficult than anticipated. The terrain was rougher than expected, and enemy patrols were more active than intelligence reports had suggested. Several times, Maya's team had to freeze in place while insurgent fighters passed within meters of their position. It took them over 4 hours to cover what should have been a 2-hour movement, but they finally reached their overwatch position just as the sun was beginning to rise. Maya quickly established her hide site and began surveying the target compound through her scope. The intelligence had been accurate. The compound was showing signs of increased activity, with numerous fighters moving in and out of the buildings. But identifying the high-value target among all the activity would require patience and careful observation. For 8 hours, Maya maintained surveillance of the compound, documenting the movements of enemy personnel and waiting for her target to reveal himself. It was mentally and physically exhausting work, made even more difficult by the knowledge that discovery would likely mean death for her entire team. But Maya's training and natural abilities served her well, and she remained focused and alert throughout the long day. Finally, just as the sun was beginning to set, her patience was rewarded. A man matching the description of the high-value target emerged from the main building and began speaking with several other fighters in the compound's central courtyard. Maya immediately began her shooting sequence, but as she prepared to take the shot, she noticed something that made her hesitate. Standing next to the target was a young goy, probably no more than 12 years old. The child was clearly not a combatant. He appeared to be a servant or perhaps a family member. Maya's training had prepared her for many difficult scenarios, but this was one of the most challenging: how to eliminate a high-value target while ensuring that innocent civilians were not harmed. Maya spent several agonizing minutes watching the compound, waiting for an opportunity when the target would be isolated from the child. But as the minutes passed, it became clear that the boy was staying close to the target, perhaps as a form of human shield. Maya faced an impossible choice: take the shot and risk killing an innocent child, or allow a high-value target to escape and potentially continue planning attacks that would kill American soldiers. The decision was made for her when the target began moving toward a vehicle that would clearly take him away from the compound. If she was going to take the shot, it had to be now. Maya made a calculation that demonstrated both her exceptional skill as a marksman and her moral courage as a soldier. Instead of aiming for center mass, the standard procedure for long-range shots, she aimed for the head of the target, a much more difficult shot, but one that would minimize the risk of collateral damage.
The shot was perfect. The bullet struck the target precisely where Maya had aimed, dropping him instantly without harming anyone else in the compound. It was a demonstration of marksmanship that bordered on the miraculous, requiring not only exceptional shooting skill, but also incredible courage to attempt such a difficult shot under extreme pressure. The aftermath of the operation was swift and dramatic. Maya's team immediately began their extraction movement, knowing that the enemy would quickly organize a response. As they moved through the darkness toward their pickup zone, Maya could hear the sounds of vehicles and shouting voices as insurgent forces began searching for the sniper who had eliminated their leader. The helicopter extraction went smoothly, but Maya knew that the real evaluation of her performance would come during the debrief back at base. Taking a headshot at extreme range in low-light conditions while under pressure was not standard procedure, and she would need to explain her decision to her commanders. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson's reaction was immediate and unequivocal. "Rodriguez," he said after reviewing the mission report, "what you did out there was nothing short of extraordinary. That shot, under those conditions, with those constraints, was the work of a master sniper. But more importantly, your decision to risk a more difficult shot in order to protect innocent life shows exactly the kind of moral courage we need in our leaders." Word of Maya's performance spread beyond Forward Operating Base Chapman. Senior commanders throughout the theater began requesting her participation in their most critical operations. She was becoming known not just as an exceptional sniper, but as a soldier who could be trusted to make the right decision under the most difficult circumstances. But with increased responsibility came increased danger. Maya found herself assigned to increasingly hazardous missions, often operating in areas where enemy contact was not just likely, but virtually guaranteed. She was being tested not just by her enemies, but by her own command structure, as senior officers sought to understand the full extent of her capabilities. The ultimate test would come during an operation that would push Maya beyond her limits and force her to confront the true meaning of courage, sacrifice, and what it means to be a warrior. That test was approaching faster than anyone realized, and when it came, it would change not only Maya's life, but the lives of every soldier who witnessed what happened next.
The mission briefing on March 15, 2005 was unlike anything Maya had experienced before. The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Chapman was packed with personnel from multiple units, including Special Operations Forces, intelligence officers, and senior commanders from division level. The presence of so many high-ranking officials immediately signaled that this was no routine operation. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson stood at the front of the room, his expression grave as he began the briefing. Behind him, a large screen displayed satellite imagery of a remote mountain valley deep in Taliban-controlled territory. The images showed a heavily fortified compound nestled against the base of a steep cliff, surrounded by multiple defensive positions and what appeared to be an extensive network of bunkers and fighting positions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patterson began, his voice carrying the weight of command, "what you're looking at is the operational headquarters of Mullah Abdul Rahman, the Taliban commander responsible for coordinating insurgent activities throughout the eastern provinces. Intelligence sources have confirmed that Rahman is planning a major offensive against coalition forces, potentially involving coordinated attacks on multiple forward operating bases, including our own." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A coordinated attack on multiple bases could result in hundreds of casualties and potentially force coalition forces to abandon key strategic positions in the region. This was not just another high-value target elimination. This was a mission that could determine the course of the entire war in Afghanistan. Patterson continued, clicking to the next slide, which showed detailed topographical maps of the target area. The compound is located in the Wangali Valley, approximately 40 kilometers from the nearest coalition forces. The terrain is extremely difficult, with steep mountains on all sides and only one viable approach route. Intelligence estimates suggest that Rahman has between 50 and 80 fighters defending the position, including experienced foreign fighters from Pakistan and Chechnya.
Maya studied the maps carefully, her tactical mind already analyzing approach routes, firing positions, and potential escape routes that the compound provided. The compound was positioned in what military tacticians call a kill box, a location that was extremely difficult to attack and relatively easy to defend. Any assault force would be channeled into predetermined fields of fire where enemy forces would have every advantage. The operation will be conducted in 3 phases. Phase 1 involves the insertion of reconnaissance teams to confirm enemy strength and positions. Phase 2 is a precision strike by the Army Rangers to eliminate key defensive positions and secure the outer perimeter. Phase 3 is the main assault, designed to capture or kill Raman and secure any intelligence materials in the compound. Maya's heart rate increased slightly as she realized where this briefing was heading. Operations of this magnitude typically involved the military's best snipers, and given her recent performance record, she knew she would likely be selected for a critical role. Patterson's next words confirmed her suspicions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will serve as the primary sniper for this operation, responsible for overwatch and elimination of high-value targets during all 3 phases. She will be positioned on Hill 2847, approximately 1,200 meters from the target compound, where she will have commanding views of the entire objective area. The assignment was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Maya would be operating alone with only her spotter, Corporal Williams, providing intelligence and security for the entire operation from a position that would be extremely difficult to reinforce if things went wrong. If she failed to eliminate key targets at critical moments, the entire operation could collapse and dozens of American soldiers could be killed or wounded. After the briefing, Maya spent several hours studying the target area in detail, memorizing every building, every defensive position, and every potential hiding spot where enemy fighters might position themselves. She calculated ranges to various points throughout the compound, estimated wind patterns based on topographical features, and mentally rehearsed the engagement sequences she would need to execute during each phase of the operation. That evening, Maya found herself walking the perimeter of the base, a habit she had developed when facing particularly challenging missions. The mountain air was cold and thin, and the stars overhead seemed impossibly bright in the clear desert sky. As she walked, she reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. From a young girl shooting tin cans in East Los Angeles to one of the Army's most trusted snipers, preparing for what could be the most important mission of her career. Her contemplation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Maya turned to see Lieutenant Colonel Patterson walking toward her, his hands clasped behind his back in the manner of career military officers. "Rodriguez," he said as he approached, "I wanted to speak with you privately before tomorrow's operation." "Yes, sir," Maya replied, coming to attention. "At ease," Patterson said, gesturing for her to continue walking. "I want you to know that your selection for this mission wasn't taken lightly. This operation could determine the success or failure of our entire campaign in this region, and I'm putting a tremendous amount of trust in your abilities." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. "I understand, sir. I won't let you down." Patterson studied her carefully in the starlight. "Rodriguez, in my 23 years of military service, I've learned that the most dangerous moment for any soldier is when they become overconfident in their abilities. You've had remarkable success over the past year, and that success has earned you a reputation as one of our most effective operators. But tomorrow, you'll be facing challenges unlike anything you've encountered before." Maya nodded, understanding the warning implicit in Patterson's words. Success in previous operations was no guarantee of success in future ones, and the enemy they would be facing tomorrow was experienced, well-equipped, and fighting on terrain they knew intimately. "Sir, I know this mission is different. The stakes are higher, the enemy is more capable, and the margin for error is essentially zero. But I also know that my training has prepared me for exactly this type of challenge. I'm confident in my abilities, but I'm not overconfident. I understand that tomorrow everything I've learned will be put to the ultimate test." Patterson smiled slightly, appreciating both Maya's confidence and her awareness of the dangers ahead. "Good. That's exactly the attitude I want to hear. Now, get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As Patterson walked away, Maya continued her circuit of the base perimeter, using the quiet time to mentally prepare for the mission ahead. She knew that tomorrow would test not only her shooting skills, but her tactical judgment, her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, and her capacity to make life-and-death decisions in rapidly evolving situations. The pre-mission routine began at 0300 hours with a final briefing and equipment check. Maya meticulously inspected every piece of her gear, from her primary weapon system to her backup equipment and emergency supplies. Her M24 sniper rifle had been zeroed and re-zeroed multiple times, and she had personally inspected every round of ammunition she would be carrying. Corporal Williams met her at the armory, and together they conducted a final review of their communication procedures, target priorities, and emergency protocols. Williams had proven himself to be an exceptional spotter over their months of working together, and Maya trusted him completely to provide accurate range estimation, wind calls, and tactical intelligence during the operation. At 0430 hours, the helicopter insertion began. Maya and Williams boarded a Black Hawk helicopter along with the reconnaissance teams that would be conducting the initial phase of the operation. The flight to the target area would take approximately 90 minutes, flying nap-of-the-earth routes designed to avoid enemy observation and anti-aircraft fire. As the helicopter lifted off from Forward Operating Base Chapman, Maya felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and controlled nervousness that preceded major operations. She had learned to channel these feelings into heightened awareness and tactical focus, using the pre-combat stress to sharpen her senses and prepare her mind for the challenges ahead. The flight through the Afghan mountains was spectacular and terrifying in equal measure. The pilot flew the helicopter through narrow valleys and around towering peaks, staying low to avoid radar detection while navigating some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. Maya watched the landscape pass below them, noting key terrain features and mentally updating her tactical plans based on the actual ground conditions. As they approached the target area, the helicopter began its final descent toward the landing zone that had been selected for Maya's team. The LZ was located approximately 3 kilometers from her intended firing position, requiring a difficult cross-country movement through enemy territory.
But the distance was necessary to avoid alerting enemy forces to the presence of coalition troops in the area. The helicopter insertion was flawless, executed with the precision that comes from months of training and years of experience. Maya and Corporal Williams slipped off the aircraft and immediately disappeared into the rocky terrain, moving quickly away from the landing zone as the Black Hawk lifted off and disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. Within minutes, the sound of the helicopter had faded completely, leaving them alone in enemy territory with nothing but their skills, their equipment, and their training to keep them alive. The movement to their overwatch position was one of the most challenging cross-country movements Maya had ever attempted. The terrain was a nightmare of loose rock, steep inclines, and deep ravines that had to be crossed without making any sound that might alert enemy sentries. Every step had to be carefully planned and executed with constant attention to noise discipline, camouflage, and route selection. Maya's physical conditioning, honed by months of mountain operations, served her well during the grueling 3-hour movement. Her pack, weighing over 60 pounds and containing her rifle, ammunition, communications equipment, and survival gear, would have been crushing for most soldiers. But Maya had trained extensively with heavy loads, understanding that sniper operations often required carrying substantial amounts of equipment over long distances. Corporal Williams proved once again why he was considered one of the best spotters in the division. His
His ability to navigate through the difficult terrain while maintaining perfect noise discipline was exceptional, and his constant awareness of potential threats and tactical considerations made him an invaluable partner for this type of operation. As they approached their intended firing position on Hill 2847, Maya began to feel the familiar sensation of pre-combat focus settling over her. Her breathing became deeper and more controlled, her movements more deliberate and precise, and her awareness of her surroundings heightened to an almost supernatural level. This was the mental state that separated truly elite snipers from merely competent ones, the ability to achieve perfect clarity of thought and purpose in the most stressful environments imaginable. The final approach to their hide site required exceptional care. Intelligence reports suggested that enemy forces conducted regular patrols in the area, and any sign of coalition presence would immediately alert the entire enemy garrison. Maya and Williams moved with painstaking slowness, covering the final 500 meters to their position in over an hour. Their hide site was a natural depression in the rocky hillside that provided both concealment from enemy observation and commanding views of the target compound. Maya spent nearly 30 minutes carefully camouflaging their position, using natural materials to break up the outline of their equipment and create shadows that would make them virtually invisible to enemy observers. Once their position was established, Maya began the methodical process of range estimation and target identification. Using her spotting scope, she carefully examined every building in the compound, every defensive position, and every potential target area. The intelligence briefings had been accurate. The compound was heavily defended with multiple machine gun positions, mortar pits, and what appeared to be rocket-propelled grenade teams positioned throughout the complex. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Williams established communication with the command post and began providing initial intelligence reports based on their observations. The compound was showing significant activity, with numerous fighters moving between buildings and defensive positions. More importantly, they had identified several individuals who matched the descriptions of high-value targets, including what appeared to be foreign fighters in leadership positions. For 6 hours, Maya maintained surveillance of the compound, documenting enemy activities, and waiting for Phase 2 of the operation to begin. The Ranger assault teams were scheduled to begin their approach at 1400 hours, and Maya's first responsibility would be to provide overwatch and eliminate any threats that might endanger the advancing forces. At precisely 1400 hours, Maya's radio crackled with the voice of the Ranger team leader. Overwatch, this is Ranger 6. We are beginning our approach. Request immediate intelligence update on enemy positions. Maya keyed her radio, her voice calm and professional despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. Ranger 6, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on multiple enemy positions. I count approximately 30 fighters visible in the compound, with heavy weapons positions at the north and south ends of the complex. No sign of the primary target at this time. As the Ranger teams began their approach through the valley below, Maya shifted into what she called her combat focus mode. Every sense was heightened, every movement calculated, every decision filtered through years of training and experience. She tracked multiple potential targets through her scope, prioritizing threats based on their ability to inflict casualties on the approaching friendly forces. The first sign of trouble came when one of the enemy sentries spotted movement in the valley below and began shouting warnings to his companions. Within seconds, the entire compound erupted into activity as fighters rushed to their battle positions and began scanning the surrounding terrain for signs of attack. Maya's training took over instantly. Her first shot eliminated the sentry who had spotted the Ranger teams, dropping him silently before he could provide more detailed information to his companions. But the damage had already been done, the element of surprise had been lost, and what was supposed to be a carefully coordinated assault was rapidly deteriorating into a chaotic firefight. The Rangers, professional soldiers with years of combat experience, adapted quickly to the changed circumstances. They immediately shifted from a stealth approach to a rapid assault using suppressive fire and tactical movement to close with the enemy positions. But they were advancing uphill against entrenched defenders who knew the terrain intimately, and casualties were inevitable. Maya's role became critical as the firefight intensified. From her elevated position, she could see threats that were invisible to the Rangers advancing through the valley. Her second shot eliminated a machine gunner who was attempting to establish an enfilading fire position that would have devastated the advancing forces.
Her third shot took out a mortar team that was preparing to rain indirect fire down on the Ranger assault elements. But for every target Maya eliminated, two more seemed to take its place. The enemy was fighting with the desperation of men who knew they were trapped, and their fire discipline and tactical coordination was far superior to anything Maya had encountered in previous operations. These were not inexperienced local fighters. These were seasoned warriors who had been fighting coalition forces for years. The situation became critical when one of the Ranger squads became pinned down by heavy fire from multiple positions. Maya could see through her scope that the squad leader had been wounded, and several of his men were unable to move due to the intensity of enemy fire. If something didn't change quickly, the entire squad could be wiped out. Maya made a decision that demonstrated both her tactical genius and her moral courage. Instead of continuing to engage individual targets at long range, she began a systematic suppression campaign designed to break the enemy's coordinated defense. Moving from target to target with machine-like precision, she eliminated key leaders and weapons operators in a sequence calculated to create maximum psychological impact on the defending forces. Her shooting during this phase of the battle was nothing short of extraordinary. In the span of 10 minutes, she eliminated 12 enemy fighters, including 3 squad leaders and 2 heavy weapons operators. More importantly, her precise targeting began to create gaps in the enemy's defensive coordination, allowing the Ranger teams to advance and consolidate their positions. But Maya's aggressive shooting had an unintended consequence. It revealed her position to enemy observers. As she engaged her 15th target of the day, muzzle flashes from a concealed position in the compound indicated that enemy marksmen had identified her hide site and were attempting to return fire. The first enemy shots impacted the rocks around Maya's position, sending fragments flying and confirming that she had been compromised. Williams immediately began calling in artillery support to suppress the enemy marksmen, but Maya knew that their position was no longer tenable. They would need to relocate quickly or risk being overrun by enemy forces moving to assault their position.
The decision to relocate was made for them when a rocket-propelled grenade exploded just 20 meters from their hide site, showering them with rock fragments and confirming that the enemy had not only located their position, but was actively targeting it with heavy weapons. Maya and Williams began a tactical withdrawal under fire, moving from cover to cover while enemy bullets snapped overhead and impacted the rocks around them. Maya's years of training in escape and evasion techniques served her well as they moved through the treacherous terrain under enemy fire. She had practiced countless scenarios where sniper teams had to relocate under pressure, but the reality was far more intense than any training exercise. Every movement had to be calculated, not only for tactical advantage, but for survival, as enemy forces were clearly attempting to cut off their escape routes. Williams proved his worth during this critical phase, providing covering fire and communication with friendly forces while Maya identified their new position. His steady performance under extreme pressure demonstrated why he had been selected as her spotter. In the chaos of combat, he maintained his professional composure and continued to provide the tactical support that Maya needed to be effective. Their new firing position was a rocky outcropping approximately 400 meters from their original site, offering different angles on the target compound, but requiring them to recalculate all their range estimations and firing solutions. Maya quickly established her new hide, using natural camouflage and positioning techniques that made them virtually invisible to enemy observers. From this new position, Maya could see that the battle had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous than originally planned. The Ranger assault had succeeded in breaching the outer perimeter of the compound, but they were now engaged in brutal close-quarters combat with enemy forces that refused to surrender. The original plan had called for a quick surgical operation, but what was unfolding was a protracted battle that would test every soldier involved. Maya's radio crackled with increasingly urgent communications from the Ranger teams. Overwatch, this is Ranger 6. We have multiple casualties and are requesting immediate suppression of enemy positions on the north side of the compound. We are taking heavy fire from fortified positions that we cannot assault directly. Maya immediately began scanning the northern section of the compound, identifying the defensive positions that were causing problems for the advancing Rangers. What she saw made her stomach tighten with concern. The enemy had prepared interlocking fields of fire that created kill zones designed to channel attacking forces into predetermined areas where they could be destroyed by concentrated firepower.
Her tactical analysis revealed the key to breaking the enemy's defensive coordination. There were three primary strong points that anchored the entire northern defensive line. If she could eliminate the leaders and heavy weapons operators in these positions, the entire defensive structure would collapse, allowing the Rangers to advance and complete their mission. Maya began what would later be described by military historians as one of the most remarkable displays of precision shooting under combat conditions in modern warfare. Moving systematically from target to target, she eliminated the key personnel in each defensive position with shots that demonstrated not only exceptional marksmanship, but tactical intelligence that bordered on genius. Her first target was a machine gun team leader who was coordinating fire between multiple positions. The shot was technically difficult, requiring her to engage a partially concealed target at extreme range while accounting for wind conditions that had changed since her last engagement. The bullet found its mark perfectly, immediately disrupting the coordination between defensive positions. Her second target was more challenging, a sniper who had been engaging Ranger forces from a concealed position in the compound's main building. Maya had to wait nearly 10 minutes for the enemy sniper to reveal himself enough to present a viable target. When the opportunity came, her shot was instant and lethal, eliminating a threat that had already wounded two Rangers. But it was her third shot that would become the stuff of military legend. An enemy commander had positioned himself in a second-story window of the compound's central building, directing the defense while remaining mostly concealed behind stone walls. Maya could see only a small portion of the man's head and shoulder, a target that most snipers would consider impossible to engage at that range. Maya spent several minutes calculating the shot, accounting not only for range and wind, but for the angle of the target and the ballistic characteristics of her ammunition at extreme range. When she finally squeezed the trigger, the bullet traveled over 1,200 meters, threading through an opening barely 18 inches wide, and struck the enemy commander precisely where she had aimed. The psychological impact of the shot on the defending forces was immediate and devastating. The elimination of their commander, accomplished with such obvious precision and skill, broke the morale of many defenders and caused a visible decline in their tactical coordination. The Rangers, recognizing the opportunity created by Maya's precision shooting, immediately launched a coordinated assault on the weakened defensive positions. Within 30 minutes, they had secured the northern section of the compound and were advancing on the central buildings where intelligence suggested the primary target might be located. But Maya's aggressive shooting had once again drawn enemy attention to her position. This time, the response was more sophisticated and dangerous. Enemy forces had positioned a team of experienced marksmen in concealed positions specifically to hunt coalition snipers, and they were using Maya's muzzle flashes and tactical patterns to triangulate her location. The first indication of this new threat came when a bullet impacted just inches from Maya's head, followed immediately by the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle. Maya instantly recognized the signature of a professional sniper engaging her position, and she knew that she was now involved in what military snipers call a duel, a deadly game of hide-and-seek where the first person to make a mistake would likely not survive. Williams immediately began scanning the compound for signs of the enemy sniper, while Maya remained motionless, knowing that any movement might reveal her position to her opponent. This was perhaps the most mentally challenging aspect of sniper warfare, the ability to remain perfectly still while knowing that an enemy marksman was actively hunting you with a high-powered rifle. For nearly 20 minutes, Maya and the enemy sniper engaged in a deadly patience contest, each waiting for the other to reveal their position through movement or muzzle flash. Maya's training in counter-sniper tactics served her well during this period, as she used every technique she had learned to identify her opponent's location while remaining invisible to his observation. The breakthrough came when the enemy sniper made a critical error in fieldcraft. Attempting to get a better angle on Maya's position, he moved to a new location that briefly exposed his silhouette against the sky. Maya saw the movement instantly and began tracking the enemy marksman as he settled into his new position. What happened next would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it as one of the most remarkable shots in military history. The enemy sniper was positioned approximately 1,400 meters away, partially concealed behind stone walls, with only a small portion of his scope and rifle barrel visible. Maya would have to thread her bullet through an opening no larger than a dinner plate, accounting for extreme range, wind conditions, and the ballistic drop of her ammunition. Maya spent nearly 5 minutes calculating the shot, using every piece of knowledge and experience she had accumulated over years of training in combat. When she finally squeezed the trigger, she knew, instantly, that the shot was perfect. The bullet struck the enemy sniper's rifle scope, destroying the optical device and sending fragments into the marksman's face, effectively eliminating him as a threat. The successful completion of the sniper duel marked a turning point in the overall battle. With the elimination of their most skilled marksmen and the continuing pressure from Ranger assault teams, enemy resistance began to collapse. Within an hour, coalition forces had secured the entire compound and were beginning the process of searching for the primary target and any intelligence materials that might be present. But Maya's role in the operation was far from over. As the Rangers moved through the compound conducting their search, intelligence reports began suggesting that the primary target, Mullah Abdul Rahman, might not be in the main compound, but in a secondary location that had not been identified during the planning phase. If this was true, the entire operation might be compromised, and Rahman could escape to continue his campaign against coalition forces. Maya's next challenge would test not only her shooting skills, but her ability to adapt to rapidly changing tactical situations. The mission that had started as a carefully planned assault was about to become something entirely different. A desperate hunt for a high-value target who seemed to have anticipated coalition tactics and prepared accordingly. As Maya prepared for what might be the most critical phase of the operation, she reflected on how far she had come from that young girl shooting tin cans in East LA. Every challenge she had faced, every skill she had developed, and every lesson she had learned had prepared her for this moment. But the ultimate test was still ahead, and failure was not an option.
The intelligence update came through Maya's radio with the urgency that accompanies battlefield revelations that could change everything. Overwatch, this is Ranger 6. Primary target is not in the main compound. Intelligence assets have identified a secondary location approximately 2 kilometers northeast of our current position. We need immediate reconnaissance of the new target area. Maya felt her heart sink as the implications became clear. 2 kilometers might not seem like a great distance, but in the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan, it represented hours of dangerous movement through territory that was likely defended by enemy forces who now knew that coalition troops were operating in the area. Worse, her current position provided no visibility of the northeastern approaches, meaning she would need to relocate again to provide effective overwatch for any assault on the secondary target. Williams was already studying their topographical maps, identifying potential routes and firing positions that might provide coverage of the new target area. His finger traced along contour lines and elevation markers as he calculated movement times and analyzed sight lines. "Maya," he said quietly, using her first name in the informal way that combat partners sometimes do when facing critical decisions. "There's a ridgeline about 1,500 meters northeast of here that might give us eyes on the secondary target. But getting there means crossing at least one valley where we'll be completely exposed, and we'll be moving away from any possibility of friendly support." Maya studied the maps carefully, her tactical mind weighing risks and opportunities. The movement would be extremely dangerous, requiring them to cross open terrain while enemy forces were actively searching for coalition troops. But without sniper overwatch, any assault on the secondary target would be far more costly in terms of casualties, and there was no guarantee that other coalition snipers could get into position quickly enough to support the operation. "Ranger 6, this is Overwatch. I can provide coverage of the secondary target area, but I need at least 2 hours to get into position. Recommend you maintain current positions and prepare for follow-on operations while I conduct reconnaissance." The response was immediate and reflected the urgency of the tactical situation. "Overwatch, negative. Intelligence indicates primary target may be preparing to exfiltrate the area. We need to move now or risk losing him entirely. Can you provide any support from your current position?" Maya raised her spotting scope and carefully examined the terrain to the northeast. The secondary target area was barely visible through a gap in the mountains, appearing as little more than a cluster of buildings in a distant valley. The range was extreme, nearly 2,000 meters, and the angle was poor, but it might be possible to provide some level of overwatch support. "Ranger 6, this is Overwatch. I have limited visibility of the target area from my current position. Range is approximately 2,000 meters and I can only see a portion of the objective. I can provide some support, but it will be at the extreme limits of my capabilities." What Maya didn't mention was that shooting at 2,000 meters in mountainous terrain with variable wind conditions was at the very edge of what was considered possible with her equipment. The M24 sniper system was an exceptional weapon, but it had been designed for engagements at much shorter ranges. At 2,000 meters, bullet drop would be measured in dozens of feet, and wind deflection could easily cause misses by several meters. But Maya had spent years pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible with the M24 system. She had experimented with different ammunition types, studied the ballistic characteristics of her rifle in extreme detail, and developed shooting techniques that allowed her to engage targets at ranges that other snipers considered impossible. The decision to attempt Overwatch support at such extreme range was both tactical and moral. Maya knew that without sniper support, the Ranger assault on the secondary target would likely result in significant casualties. Every shot she could take that eliminated an enemy threat or suppressed enemy fire was a shot that might save American lives. The Rangers began their movement toward the secondary target immediately, knowing that speed was now more critical than stealth. Rahman had likely been alerted to the coalition presence by the firefight at the main compound, and every minute of delay increased the chances that he would escape. Maya began her preparations for what would be the most challenging long-range shooting of her career. She spent several minutes studying wind indicators throughout the intervening terrain, looking for flags, smoke, vegetation movement, and other signs that would help her estimate wind speed and direction at different points along the bullet's trajectory. The ballistic calculations were complex beyond anything she had attempted before. At 2,000 meters, her bullet would take over 2.5 seconds to reach its target, during which time it would be affected by multiple wind layers, temperature variations, and atmospheric conditions that could vary significantly over such a long distance. Maya's first indication of enemy activity in the secondary target area came when she observed several vehicles arriving at the compound and armed men taking defensive positions around the buildings. Through her scope, she could see that these were not the local fighters they had encountered at the main compound. These appeared to be more experienced and better equipped, possibly including the foreign fighters that intelligence reports had mentioned. "Ranger 6, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on the secondary target. Multiple armed personnel taking defensive positions. Count at least 15 military-age males with weapons, possibly more inside the buildings. I also observed 3 vehicles that could be used for exfiltration." The Rangers were still 40 minutes away from the secondary target, moving as quickly as possible through terrain that seemed to design to prevent rapid military movement. Maya realized that she might need to engage targets at extreme range, not just to support the eventual assault, but to prevent Rahman from escaping before the Rangers could get into position. Her first opportunity came when she observed a group of armed men positioning a heavy machine gun that would dominate the approach route the Rangers would need to use to taking casualties. The weapon was being set up by a crew of 3 men, and eliminating them would significantly improve the Rangers' chances of reaching the objective without taking casualties. Maya's first shot at 2,000 meters was a learning experience in the purest sense. Despite her careful calculations and preparation, the bullet impacted approximately 10 meters low and 5 meters to the right of her intended target. The miss provided valuable information about the actual wind conditions and ballistic performance at that extreme range, and Maya immediately began adjusting her calculations based on what she had observed. Her second shot was much closer, impacting within 2 meters of the machine gun position and causing the crew to abandon their weapon and seek cover. While she hadn't achieved a kill, she had successfully suppressed a threat that could have devastated the advancing Rangers. Maya's third shot was perfect. One of the machine gun crew members attempted to return to his weapon, exposing himself for just long enough to provide Maya with a clear target. Her bullet struck him center mass, dropping him instantly and confirming that she had successfully adjusted for the extreme range and wind conditions.
The psychological impact of Maya's shooting on the enemy defenders was immediate and significant. The realization that they were being engaged by a sniper at such extreme range created uncertainty and fear that began to affect their tactical performance. Several defenders abandoned exposed positions and moved to areas with overhead cover, reducing their effectiveness in defending the compound. Over the next 30 minutes, Maya continued to engage targets at extreme range, achieving an unprecedented level of accuracy under incredibly difficult conditions. She eliminated 2 more enemy fighters, suppressed multiple defensive positions, and most importantly, prevented the enemy from establishing the kind of coordinated defense that had made the assault on the main compound so costly. The Rangers finally reached assault positions just as Maya observed increased activity around the vehicles in the compound. It appeared that Rahman and his key personnel were preparing to evacuate, confirming intelligence reports that suggested he had anticipated coalition tactics and prepared escape routes. Ranger 6, this is Overwatch. Primary target appears to be preparing for exfiltration. Multiple personnel moving toward vehicles. Recommend immediate assault before he can escape. The Rangers' assault began immediately, with multiple teams moving simultaneously toward different sections of the compound. Maya continued to provide Overwatch support, engaging targets that threatened the advancing forces, and attempting to prevent any vehicles from leaving the area. But as the Rangers closed on the compound, Maya realized that the secondary target was better defended than intelligence reports had suggested. Enemy fighters were emerging from concealed positions, and the tactical situation was rapidly evolving into another complex firefight that would test everyone involved.
The assault on the secondary compound quickly devolved into the kind of chaotic, close-quarters combat that defined modern warfare in Afghanistan. The Rangers, despite their exceptional training and experience, found themselves facing an enemy that had learned from previous encounters with coalition forces and had prepared accordingly. Hidden fighting positions, interlocking fields of fire, and carefully planned ambush sites turned what should have been a quick assault into a prolonged battle. Maya watched the firefight unfold through her scope, feeling increasingly helpless as the range limitations of her M24 system prevented her from providing the kind of precision support that the Rangers desperately needed. At 2,000 meters, she could engage area targets and suppress enemy positions, but the kind of surgical precision required for close-quarters combat support was simply impossible. The situation became critical when one of the Ranger squads became pinned down by heavy fire from multiple positions. Maya could see through her scope that several Rangers had been wounded and were unable to move to safety. The squad was trapped in an exposed position with limited cover, and enemy fighters were maneuvering to surround them. Maya made a decision that demonstrated both her tactical intelligence and her complete commitment to her fellow soldiers. Abandoning her Overwatch position, she began a rapid movement toward the secondary compound, intending to get close enough to provide effective precision fire support for the trapped Rangers. Williams immediately protested the decision. "Maya, that's suicide. We'll never make it across that valley alive, and even if we do, we'll be cut off from any possibility of extraction." Maya understood the risks, but she also understood that the alternative was watching American soldiers die while she remained safely positioned at long range. "Danny, those Rangers are dying down there. If we don't do something, they're all going to be killed. I can't live with that." The movement across the valley toward the secondary compound was one of the most dangerous tactical movements Maya had ever attempted. The terrain offered minimal cover, and enemy observation posts on the high ground meant that any movement could be detected and engaged with direct fire. Maya and Williams moved in short rushes, using every piece of available cover and constantly changing their route to avoid establishing predictable patterns. Halfway across the valley, they came under direct fire from enemy positions in the compound. Bullets cracked overhead and impacted the rocks around them, confirming that they had been spotted and were being actively engaged. Maya's training in infantry tactics served her well as they bounded from cover to cover, using suppressive fire and tactical movement to continue their advance despite enemy resistance. The final approach to the compound was accomplished under the cover of smoke grenades thrown by the Rangers, who had recognized Maya's movement and were providing what support they could. As Maya and Williams reached effective range, approximately 400 meters from the compound, Maya immediately began engaging targets that were threatening the trapped Ranger squad.
From this closer position, Maya's shooting was devastating in its precision and effectiveness. She could see individual enemy fighters clearly, could read their tactical movements, and could place her shots exactly where they needed to go to maximum effect. In the span of 10 minutes, she eliminated 6 enemy fighters and suppressed multiple positions that had been pouring fire into the ranger positions. But Maya's aggressive shooting once again drew enemy attention, and this time, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Enemy fighters began concentrating their fire on Maya's position, and Williams was forced to return suppressive fire with his M4 carbine to keep them from being overrun. The tactical situation was rapidly approaching a crisis point. The Rangers were still pinned down, Maya and Williams were now trapped in their forward position, and enemy reinforcements were arriving from positions throughout the valley. What had started as a precision operation to eliminate a high-value target was turning into a desperate battle for survival. It was at this critical moment that Maya heard a voice on the radio that changed everything. "All stations, this is Iron Mike. I am en route to a position with reinforcements. Hold your positions and prepare for close air support." Lieutenant Colonel Patterson had made the decision to personally lead a reinforcement operation when it became clear that the mission was in danger of complete failure. Flying in aboard a Black Hawk helicopter with a team of his best soldiers, Patterson was bringing not only additional firepower, but also the kind of leadership that could turn a losing battle into a victory. The helicopter approached fast and low, taking enemy fire as it descended toward a landing zone that the Rangers had hastily cleared in the valley floor. Maya watched through her scope as Patterson and his team fast-roped from the aircraft under fire, immediately taking cover and beginning to coordinate the overall tactical situation. Patterson's voice crackled through Maya's radio. "Rodriguez, I need you to provide precision overwatch while we flank their main positions. Can you suppress the northern defensive line while my teams move around to the east?" Maya immediately understood Patterson's tactical plan and began engaging targets in the northern section of the compound. Her shooting was even more precise than usual, driven by the knowledge that Patterson himself was leading the flanking movement and that any mistake on her part could result in his death. But as Maya focused on supporting Patterson's assault, she failed to notice that enemy fighters had identified her position and were preparing a coordinated assault on her hide site. Williams spotted the threat first, seeing armed men moving through the rocks toward their position from multiple directions. "Maya, we've got company," Williams said urgently. "Multiple fighters moving on our position from the east and south. They're trying to surround us." Maya found herself facing the nightmare scenario that every sniper fears: discovery by enemy forces at close range. Snipers are trained to engage targets at long distance while remaining concealed and protected. Close quarters combat with multiple attackers was exactly the situation that sniper teams were least equipped to handle. Williams immediately began engaging the closest threats with his M4 carbine, while Maya attempted to continue providing overwatch support for Patterson's assault. But the enemy fighters were getting closer, and their accurate fire was making it increasingly difficult for Maya to maintain her precision shooting. The situation reached its climax when Maya realized that one of the enemy fighters approaching their position was carrying what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade. If he managed to get close enough to fire the weapon, it would likely kill both Maya and Williams and eliminate the precision fire support that was critical to Patterson's assault. Maya made a split-second decision that demonstrated the kind of tactical intelligence and moral courage that separated truly exceptional soldiers from the rest. Abandoning her sniper rifle, she drew her sidearm and began moving to intercept the RPG gunner before he could reach an effective firing position.
What happened next would become one of the most talked about incidents in the modern military history of small unit actions. Maya, moving with the fluid grace of a soldier who had spent years training for exactly this type of situation, closed the distance to the enemy RPG gunner in a series of tactical bounds that demonstrated her complete mastery of infantry combat techniques. The enemy fighter, focused on reaching a position where he could effectively employ his weapon against Maya's hide site, failed to notice her flanking movement until it was too late. Maya's first pistol shot struck him center mass at a range of less than 20 meters, dropping him immediately and eliminating the most immediate threat to her position. But Maya's movement had exposed her to fire from other enemy fighters, and bullets began impacting around her position as she sought cover behind a rocky outcropping. Williams, maintaining his position at their original hide site, attempted to provide covering fire while Maya dealt with the immediate threats to their survival. It was at this critical moment, with Maya pinned down by enemy fire, Williams running low on ammunition, and Patterson's assault reaching its climax, that Maya heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds, followed by explosions that began walking toward the Ranger positions in the compound. The enemy had brought indirect fire support into the battle, and the accurate mortar fire was devastating the Ranger positions. Maya could see through the smoke and dust that several Rangers had been wounded by the explosions, and Patterson's assault was grinding to a halt under the weight of coordinated enemy fire. Maya realized that the mortar position had to be eliminated, but locating indirect fire weapons from her current position was virtually impossible. The mortars were likely positioned behind the ridgeline, where they would be invisible to direct observation, but capable of raining fire down on the entire battle area. It was Williams who spotted the solution. "Maya," he called over the noise of battle, "I can see the mortar flashes coming from behind that hill to the northwest. Range looks like maybe 800 meters. If you can get back to your rifle, you might be able to take them out." Maya looked at the distance between her current position and Williams's hide site, where her M24 sniper rifle waited. The route would require her to cross approximately 50 meters of open ground while under fire from multiple enemy positions. It was the kind of movement that military tacticians would classify as extremely high risk with a low probability of success. But Maya also understood that without eliminating the mortar threat, Patterson's assault would fail and casualties would mount dramatically. The moral calculus was simple: risk her own life to save the lives of her fellow soldiers or remain in safety while watching them die. Maya's decision was instantaneous and absolute. Rising from cover, she began a sprint toward Williams's position that would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it as one of the most courageous actions in modern military history. Enemy bullets snapped past her head and kicked up dust around her feet as she ran. But her focus remained entirely on reaching her rifle and eliminating the mortar threat. Williams provided covering fire throughout Maya's movement, his accurate shooting forcing several enemy fighters to seek cover instead of engaging Maya during her exposed sprint. His supporting fire was critical to Maya's survival, and his calm professionalism under extreme pressure exemplified the kind of teamwork that made elite military units so effective. Maya reached her rifle position and immediately began scanning for the mortar flashes that Williams had identified. The indirect fire position was partially concealed behind terrain features, but Maya could see enough of the weapon and crew to engage them effectively. The range was approximately 800 meters, well within her capabilities, but requiring rapid engagement before the mortar crew could adjust their fire onto her position. Maya's first shot at the mortar position was perfect, striking the gunner as he dropped another round into the tube. The mortar crew immediately began searching for the source of sniper fire, but Maya was already tracking her second target. Her second shot eliminated the assistant gunner, and her third shot destroyed the mortar tube itself, rendering the weapon inoperative. The elimination of the mortar threat immediately changed the tactical dynamics of the entire battle. Patterson's assault, which had been stalled by accurate indirect fire, resumed with renewed vigor. The Rangers, no longer pinned down by mortar fire, began advancing aggressively on enemy positions throughout the compound. But Maya's shooting had once again revealed her position to enemy observers, and the response was swift and deadly. Enemy fighters throughout the compound began concentrating their fire on Maya's hide site, and the volume of incoming fire became so intense that both Maya and Williams were forced to abandon their position and seek better cover. As they moved to a new position under fire, Maya's radio crackled with Patterson's voice. "Rodriguez, this is Iron Mike. Outstanding work on those mortars. We're making good progress on the assault, but I need you to take a look at the main building. Intelligence suggests the primary target might be preparing to escape through a back entrance." Maya quickly established her rifle in the new position and began scanning the main building of the compound. What she saw confirmed Patterson's concerns. Several figures were moving toward the rear of the building, and one of them matched the description of Mullah Abdul Rahman that had been provided in the intelligence briefing.
But the shot would be extraordinarily difficult. The target was partially concealed by building structures, the range was nearly 600 meters, and Maya would only have seconds to engage before Rahman disappeared into terrain that would make further engagement impossible. Maya began her shooting sequence with the mechanical precision that had become her trademark. Range estimation, wind calculation, ballistic compensation, every variable was analyzed and accounted for in the few seconds she had available. When she finally squeezed the trigger, she knew that this shot would determine the success or failure of the entire operation. The bullet struck Rahman in the upper torso, dropping him immediately and illuminating the primary target that had been the objective of the entire mission. But even as Maya confirmed the kill, she could see that other enemy leaders were continuing to move toward escape routes that would allow them to regroup and continue their operations against coalition forces. Patterson's voice came through her radio with obvious satisfaction. "Overwatch, this is Iron Mike. Confirm elimination of primary target. Outstanding shooting. Now I need you to prevent any remaining leadership from escaping while we secure the compound." Maya continued to engage fleeing enemy personnel, eliminating 3 more high-value targets before the remaining fighters either surrendered or melted away into the mountainous terrain. The battle for the secondary compound was over, and the mission that had started with such carefully laid plans had ultimately succeeded through the kind of individual courage and tactical excellence that defined America's finest soldiers.
The aftermath of the battle was a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and the grim business of battlefield casualties and intelligence exploitation. Maya had fired over 40 rounds during the engagement, achieved an unprecedented number of confirmed kills at extreme range, and demonstrated tactical leadership that had been critical to the mission's success. But as she sat in the rocky terrain surrounding the compound, cleaning her rifle and conducting post-combat equipment checks, she felt only the hollow satisfaction that comes from survival in combat. Williams had performed exceptionally throughout the operation, and Maya made sure that Patterson understood her spotters' critical contributions to their success. Without Williams' accurate range estimation, target spotting, and covering fire during the most critical moments of the battle, Maya's individual performance would have been impossible. The casualty count, while significant, was far lower than it would have been without Maya's precision shooting. 3 Rangers had been wounded, but all were expected to recover fully. Enemy casualties were estimated at over 30 killed, including Rahman and several other high-value targets whose elimination would significantly disrupt insurgent operations throughout the region. Patterson's personal assessment of Maya's performance was unequivocal. "Rodriguez, what you did today goes beyond exceptional marksmanship. Your tactical decision-making, your courage under fire, and your absolute commitment to the mission and your fellow soldiers represents the very best of what American warriors can be." But it was what happened 3 days later that would become the defining moment of Maya's military career, and the source of the story that would be told and retold throughout the military for years to come. Maya was conducting routine maintenance on her equipment when Patterson approached her, carrying a weapon case that she didn't immediately recognize. His expression was serious, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was about to do something that was personally meaningful to him. "Rodriguez," Patterson said, setting the case down carefully, "I want to show you something that I think you've earned the right to see." He opened the case to reveal a Barrett M82A1 .50 caliber sniper rifle, one of the most powerful and accurate long-range precision weapons in the American military arsenal. The weapon was a work of art, with custom modifications and refinements that spoke of years of careful maintenance and use by a master marksman. "This rifle," Patterson continued, "has been with me for over 15 years. I used it in Panama, in the Gulf War, in Somalia, and in the early days of operations here in Afghanistan. It's been zeroed to my specifications, modified to my preferences, and it's accounted for more confirmed enemy kills than any other weapon I've ever carried." Maya studied the weapon with the appreciation of a professional.
The Barrett .50 was legendary among military snipers, capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, powerful enough to defeat most forms of cover and concealment, and accurate enough in the right hands to make shots that seemed impossible to outside observers. "Sir," Maya said, carefully, "it's a beautiful weapon. I'm honored that you'd share it with me." Patterson smiled slightly. "Rodriguez, I'm not sharing it with you. I'm giving it to you. This rifle has served me well, but I think it's time for it to serve someone who can use it to its full potential." Maya felt her heart skip a beat. The offer was unprecedented. Senior officers simply didn't give their personal weapons to junior soldiers, especially weapons as valuable and personally significant as Patterson's Barrett rifle. But as she felt honored by the gesture, she also felt the weight of responsibility that came with it. "Sir, I can't accept this. This weapon is part of your history, part of your legacy as a soldier." Patterson's expression became more serious. "Rodriguez, let me tell you something about legacy. A weapon is just a tool, metal and wood and optical components that have no meaning or value beyond their ability to serve the mission. But a soldier's true legacy isn't in the weapons they carried or the battles they fought. It's in the soldiers they trained, the leaders they mentored, and the standards they established for those who came after them." He paused, looking directly into Maya's eyes. "What you did 3 days ago demonstrated that you've mastered every aspect of the sniper's craft. Your marksmanship is exceptional, your tactical intelligence is superior, and your absolute commitment to the mission and your fellow soldiers represents the very best of what American warriors can be." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes as she began to understand the significance of what Patterson was offering. This wasn't just about a weapon. It was about recognition, about belonging, about being accepted into a brotherhood of warriors who had proven themselves in the crucible of combat. "Sir," she said quietly, "if you believe I'm worthy of this responsibility, then I accept it with honor. I promise you that this weapon will be used only in service of our mission and our fellow soldiers." Patterson nodded with satisfaction. "I know it will, Rodriguez. Now, let me show you how to properly zero this system. The .50 caliber has different ballistic characteristics than your M24, and you'll need to understand how to maximize its effectiveness at extreme range." Over the next several hours, Patterson personally trained Maya on the Barrett system, sharing techniques and insights that had been developed over years of combat use. His instruction went beyond simple marksmanship. He taught her about target selection at extreme range, about reading environmental conditions that affected long-range shooting, and about the psychological aspects of employing such a powerful weapon system. But the most important lesson Patterson shared was about responsibility. "Rodriguez, this weapon gives you capabilities that very few soldiers will ever possess. With it, you can engage targets at ranges that most snipers consider impossible, and you can deliver effects on the battlefield that can change the course of entire operations. But with that capability comes the absolute responsibility to use it wisely." Patterson's eyes grew distant as he continued, clearly drawing from experiences that had shaped his understanding of warfare and leadership. "There will be times when you have the power to eliminate threats that no one else can reach, and times when your decision to take or not take a shot will determine whether American soldiers live or die. The technical skill to make those shots is something that can be taught and practiced, but the wisdom to know when to take them, that comes from understanding that every bullet you fire carries the weight of moral responsibility." Maya nodded, understanding that Patterson was sharing something far more valuable than marksmanship techniques. He was passing on the accumulated wisdom of a career spent making life and death decisions under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. "Sir," Maya said, "I understand the responsibility you're placing in my hands. I won't disappoint you or the soldiers who depend on me." Patterson smiled with genuine warmth. "Rodriguez, you've already proven that you understand what it means to be a warrior. Everything else is just details." As Patterson prepared to leave, He paused and looked back at Maya one final time. "There's one more thing, Rodriguez. Tomorrow we're expecting a visit from some very senior officers who want to debrief the recent operation. They're going to ask you a lot of questions about your performance, your techniques, and your recommendations for future operations. Answer them honestly, but remember that your experiences out here have given you insights that desk officers will never possess. Don't let anyone convince you that what you did was anything less than extraordinary." The next morning brought the promised visit from senior military leadership, including officers from division, corps, and even Pentagon level. Maya found herself in the unusual position of briefing colonels and generals about sniper tactics, long-range marksmanship, and the realities of combat in Afghanistan's difficult terrain. The questions were detailed and professional, reflecting a genuine desire to understand how Maya's techniques could be incorporated into broader military doctrine. But Maya could also sense an underlying skepticism from some of the senior officers, a reluctance to fully accept that a young female soldier had achieved the level of performance described in the mission reports. It was during this briefing that Patterson made the gesture that would become legendary throughout the military. As Maya finished explaining her engagement sequence during the mortar elimination phase of the battle, one of the visiting generals asked a question that clearly implied doubt about her claimed accuracy at extreme range. "Sergeant Rodriguez, the sight distances you're claiming are at the very limits of what is considered possible with standard military sniper systems. Are you certain about your range estimates?" Before Maya could respond, Patterson stepped forward with his Barrett rifle case. The room fell silent as he opened the case and carefully lifted out the massive .50 caliber weapon, holding it with the reverence that soldiers reserve for truly exceptional equipment. "General," Patterson said in a voice that carried absolute authority, "I've been using this rifle for over 15 years in combat operations around the world. I've made shots with this weapon that are documented in official after-action reports, confirmed by multiple observers, and verified through battlefield damage assessment. This rifle, in the right hands, is capable of precision that exceeds what most people consider possible."
Patterson paused, looking directly at Maya before continuing. 3 days ago, Sergeant Rodriguez demonstrated marksmanship that exceeded even my own capabilities with this system. She eliminated targets at ranges and under conditions that would challenge our most elite special operations snipers. She did it while under fire, while making tactical decisions under extreme pressure, and while risking her own life to save her fellow soldiers. The room remained silent as Patterson walked over to Maya and placed the Barrett rifle in her hands. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he said in a voice that carried throughout the briefing room, "show them what a real shot looks like." Maya accepted the weapon with the solemnity appropriate to the moment, understanding that Patterson was not just demonstrating his confidence in her abilities, he was making a statement about leadership, about merit, and about the kind of soldier that America needed in its most critical moments. The impromptu shooting demonstration took place at a range that had been hastily established in the mountains surrounding the base. Maya, using Patterson's Barrett rifle with ammunition that she had never fired before, engaged targets at distances exceeding 1,500 meters with a level of accuracy that left the visiting officers speechless. Her first shot was a perfect hit on a target that was barely visible to observers using spotting scopes. Her second shot, at an even greater range, demonstrated not just marksmanship, but an intuitive understanding of ballistics that seemed to transcend technical knowledge. By the time she had fired her fifth round, achieving 5 consecutive hits on targets that most snipers would consider unreachable, there were no more questions about her capabilities. The visiting general, who had expressed skepticism, approached Maya after the demonstration with obvious respect in his voice. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he said, "I owe you an apology. What I just witnessed goes beyond exceptional marksmanship. It's a demonstration of mastery that I've never seen before in my 30 years of military service." Patterson's response was immediate and definitive. "General, What you witnessed today is the result of natural talent, exceptional training, and the kind of dedication to excellence that separates truly great soldiers from the rest. Sergeant Rodriguez represents the very best of what our military can produce when we give our soldiers the resources and support they need to excel. But the most meaningful moment came after the official visitors had departed, and Maya found herself alone with Patterson, cleaning the Barrett rifle that was now officially hers. The weapon felt different in her hands, heavier not just because of its physical weight, but because of the responsibility and legacy that came with it. "Sir," Maya said as they worked together to properly maintain the rifle, "I want you to know that receiving this weapon is the greatest honor of my military career. I promise you that I'll use it to uphold the standards you've set and to serve the soldiers who depend on me." Patterson looked up from cleaning the rifle's bolt assembly. "Rodriguez, you've already proven that you understand what this weapon represents, but I want to tell you something that goes beyond marksmanship or tactics or any of the technical aspects of being a sniper." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "What happened during that battle 3 days ago, when you left your protected position to provide close support for the trapped Rangers, when you eliminated that mortar position under fire, when you made shot after shot that saved American lives, that wasn't just about being a good soldier. That was about being a leader, about understanding that sometimes the mission requires you to risk everything for the people who depend on you." Maya felt the weight of Patterson's words, understanding that he was describing something that went far beyond military occupational specialties or technical skills. He was talking about the intangible qualities that separated leaders from followers, warriors from soldiers, and legends from mere professionals. "Sir," Maya said quietly, "I was just doing what needed to be done. Those Rangers were in trouble, and I had the skills and equipment to help them. There wasn't really a choice to make." Patterson smiled with genuine pride. "Rodriguez, that's exactly what I'm talking about. For you, there wasn't a choice because your moral compass wouldn't allow you to choose personal safety over the lives of your fellow soldiers. That's not something that can be taught in any school or training program. That's something that comes from who you are as a person." As Maya completed the final steps of cleaning and reassembling the Barrett rifle, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that day when she first decided to join the Army. Every challenge she had faced, every skill she had developed, and every lesson she had learned had prepared her for the moment when she would be handed the most powerful precision weapon in the American arsenal and told, "Show them what a real shot looks like." The Barrett rifle would go on to serve Maya well in the remaining months of her deployment, allowing her to engage targets and achieve effects on the battlefield that would have been impossible with any other weapon system. But more than that, it served as a constant reminder of the responsibility that came with exceptional ability, and the expectation that those who possessed such capabilities would use them in service of something greater than themselves. The impact of Patterson's gesture extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Word of what had happened spread throughout the military community with the speed that only truly significant events achieve. The story of a senior commander giving his personal Barrett rifle to a young female soldier, and the context in which it happened, became a powerful symbol of merit-based recognition that transcended traditional military hierarchies. Maya found that her relationship with her fellow soldiers changed in subtle but important ways following Patterson's public endorsement of her abilities. Soldiers who had previously treated her with professional respect now approached her with something approaching reverence. Her opinions on tactical matters were sought out by officers significantly senior to her, and her presence on operations became a source of confidence for entire units. But perhaps more importantly, Maya began to notice changes in how female soldiers throughout the base looked at her. She had become a living proof that gender was not a barrier to achieving the highest levels of military excellence, and her example inspired other women to push beyond the limitations that others might try to impose on them.
One incident in particular demonstrated how Maya's reputation had evolved. A young female soldier, Private First Class Sarah Chen, approached Maya during weapons maintenance one evening. Chen was struggling with marksmanship qualification and was facing the possibility of being transferred out of a combat role due to her shooting difficulties. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said hesitantly, "I was wondering if you could give me some advice about shooting. I've been having trouble with my qualification scores, and I heard that you might be able to help me." Maya looked up from cleaning the Barrett rifle, immediately recognizing the mix of hope and desperation in the young soldier's voice. She remembered her own early struggles with marksmanship, and more importantly, she remembered the instructors who had taken the time to help her develop her skills. "Chen," Maya said, setting down her cleaning rod, "let's go to the range. Show me what you're doing, and let's see if we can figure out what's going wrong." Over the next several hours, Maya worked with Chen on the fundamentals of marksmanship, breathing techniques, trigger control, sight alignment, and the mental discipline required for accurate shooting. What she discovered was that Chen had excellent natural ability, but she had developed some bad habits early in her training that were preventing her from achieving her potential. Maya's instruction went beyond simple technical correction. She shared the mental techniques she had developed for maintaining focus under pressure, the physical conditioning routines that improved shooting stability, and, most importantly, the confidence-building exercises that helped shooters believe in their own abilities. The results were dramatic. Within a week, Chen had improved her marksmanship scores by over 30%, and within a month, she was shooting at levels that qualified her for advanced marksmanship training. But more than the technical improvement, Maya had given Chen something far more valuable: the knowledge that with proper instruction and dedicated practice, any soldier could achieve levels of performance they might have thought impossible. Patterson observed this mentoring relationship with obvious approval. "Rodriguez," he said after watching one of Maya's impromptu marksmanship lessons, "one of the marks of a true professional is the willingness to share knowledge and help others improve. What you're doing with these young soldiers is just as important as your performance in combat." Maya's response reflected her growing understanding of what military leadership really meant. "Sir, I had instructors who took the time to help me when I was struggling. Passing on what I've learned isn't just good for these soldiers, it's good for the entire unit. The better everyone shoots, the more effective we all become." This philosophy of shared excellence became a defining characteristic of Maya's approach to military service. She began conducting informal marksmanship clinics for soldiers throughout the base, sharing techniques and insights that had taken her years to develop. Her instruction was always practical and focused on real-world application, drawing from her extensive combat experience to provide context that classroom instruction could never match. But Maya's influence extended beyond marksmanship training. Soldiers began seeking her advice on tactical matters, leadership challenges, and the mental aspects of combat performance. She found herself serving as an informal mentor to soldiers of all ranks, providing guidance that went far beyond her official responsibilities as a sniper. One conversation in particular revealed the depth of Maya's influence on the soldiers around her. Corporal Williams, her longtime spotter, approached her with a question that had obviously been troubling him for some time. "Maya," Williams said, using the informal address that had become natural between them, "I've been thinking about what happened during that last operation, when you left your position to help those trapped Rangers. I understand why you did it, and I know it was the right call, but I keep wondering, how do you make those decisions so quickly? How do you know when to take risks that could get you killed?" Maya considered the question carefully, recognizing that Williams was asking about something fundamental to military leadership: the ability to make moral and tactical decisions under extreme pressure when lives hang in the balance. "Danny," she said finally, "I think it comes down to understanding what you're really fighting for. When I saw those Rangers pinned down and taking casualties, the decision wasn't really about risk assessment or tactical calculations. It was about the fact that those were my fellow soldiers and they needed help that only I could provide. I think the moment you start calculating personal risk against mission requirements, you've already lost the moral clarity that makes good decisions possible. The mission and your fellow soldiers have to come first, always. Everything else is just details." Williams nodded slowly, understanding that Maya was describing something that went beyond military doctrine or tactical training. She was talking about the moral foundation that made great soldiers great, the absolute commitment to something greater than personal survival. This conversation, like many others Maya had with soldiers throughout the base, revealed the extent to which she had become not just an exceptional sniper, but a leader whose influence extended far beyond her official rank or position.
Soldiers sought her guidance because they recognized that she possessed something rare and valuable: the ability to maintain moral clarity and tactical effectiveness under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Patterson's final assessment of Maya's deployment reflected his understanding of her complete contribution to the unit's success. "Rodriguez," he said during their last meeting before her rotation home, "your marksmanship achievements are well documented and speak for themselves. But what I want you to understand is that your real contribution to this unit went far beyond the targets you eliminated or the operations you supported." He gestured toward the group of soldiers conducting evening weapons maintenance nearby, many of whom had benefited from Maya's mentoring and instruction. "You changed the culture of this unit. You raised the standards, you shared your knowledge, and you demonstrated every day what it means to be a professional soldier. That legacy will continue long after you've rotated back to the States." Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction at Patterson's words, understanding that she had achieved something far more meaningful than personal recognition or individual accomplishment. She had contributed to making her unit better, stronger, and more effective, and she had helped other soldiers develop capabilities they might never have discovered on their own. As Maya prepared for her final missions before rotation, she reflected on how completely her understanding of military service had evolved since her arrival in Afghanistan. She had come as a young soldier eager to prove herself in combat, focused primarily on demonstrating her individual capabilities and earning the respect of her peers. She was leaving as a warrior who understood that individual excellence was meaningless unless it served the larger mission and contributed to the success and survival of her fellow soldiers. The Barrett rifle that Patterson had entrusted to her had become more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of the responsibility that came with exceptional capability, and a reminder that true warriors are defined not by what they can do, but by what they choose to do for others.
The remaining 6 months of Maya's deployment passed in a blur of operations that seemed to blend together into one continuous test of skill, endurance, and moral courage. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle proved to be everything Patterson had promised and more, a weapon system that extended Maya's capabilities far beyond what she had thought possible and allowed her to engage targets under conditions that would have been hopeless with her previous equipment. But more than the technical capabilities of the weapon, Maya found herself changed by the responsibility that came with carrying Patterson's rifle. Every mission became an opportunity to live up to the trust he had placed in her, and every shot carried the weight of the legacy she was now part of. She was no longer just Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, an exceptionally skilled sniper. She was the soldier who had been deemed worthy to carry Iron Mike Patterson's personal weapon into combat. The psychological impact of this recognition extended far beyond Maya herself. Word of Patterson's gesture spread throughout the military community in Afghanistan and beyond, becoming a story that was told and retold wherever soldiers gathered. The image of a senior commander handing his personal weapon to a young female soldier and telling her to show them what a real shot looks like became a symbol of merit-based recognition that transcended traditional military hierarchies. Maya's performance with the Barrett rifle exceeded even Patterson's expectations. Her confirmed kill count increased dramatically, but more importantly, her presence on operations began to have strategic effects that went beyond simple target elimination. Enemy forces throughout the region became increasingly reluctant to operate in areas where Maya was known to be active,
and intelligence reports began indicating that insurgent leaders were altering their operational patterns specifically to avoid encounters with what they had begun calling the ghost sniper. One operation in particular demonstrated the full potential of Maya's enhanced capabilities. Intelligence had identified a Taliban logistics network that was using a mountain pass to move weapons and personnel between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The pass was heavily defended and positioned in terrain that made conventional assault virtually impossible. But Maya, positioned with the Barrett rifle at a range of nearly 2,200 meters, was able to systematically eliminate the key personnel and equipment that made the logistics operation possible. Over the course of 3 days, Maya eliminated 11 high-value targets, destroyed 4 vehicles, and rendered an entire supply route unusable to enemy forces. The operation was conducted with such precision and at such extreme range that enemy forces were unable to locate her position, much less mount any effective counter-response. It was a demonstration of how individual excellence, properly equipped and positioned, could achieve strategic effects that might otherwise require much larger military operations. Patterson's assessment of Maya's performance during this operation was characteristically direct. Rodriguez, what you accomplished in that mountain pass represents a new paradigm for precision warfare. You achieved strategic effects through tactical excellence, and you did it with a level of professionalism that would make any commander proud. But perhaps the most significant moment of Maya's deployment came not during a major operation, but during a routine patrol that went wrong in ways that no one could have anticipated. Maya was providing overwatch for a convoy moving through what should have been a secure area when the lead vehicle struck an improvised explosive device that killed 2 soldiers instantly and wounded several others. The IED attack was followed immediately by a coordinated ambush that pinned down the surviving convoy personnel and prevented medical evacuation of the wounded. Maya, positioned over 1,000 meters away, found herself in the position of being the only coalition asset capable of providing effective support for the trapped soldiers. What followed was perhaps the most intense 30 minutes of combat in Maya's military career. Using the Barrett rifle, she engaged enemy positions throughout the ambush site, eliminating threats and suppressing enemy fire that was preventing the convoy from reorganizing and calling for medical support. Her shooting was nothing short of extraordinary. Precision fire delivered under extreme time pressure, while knowing that every second of delay meant that wounded soldiers might die. Maya eliminated 7 enemy fighters during the engagement, but more importantly, her precision suppression allowed the convoy to establish security, treat their wounded, and call for medical evacuation. The 2 soldiers who had been critically wounded in the IED blast survived because Maya's shooting prevented enemy forces from overrunning the convoy before medical help could arrive. After the convoy was safely evacuated, Patterson personally flew to Maya's position to conduct the after-action review. His assessment was brief but meaningful. Rodriguez, today you saved lives. That's the ultimate measure of a warrior's worth. As Maya's deployment neared an end, she began to reflect on how dramatically her life had changed since that day when she first decided to join the army. She had gone from a young woman trying to prove herself in a male-dominated profession to one of the most respected and capable snipers in the entire military. But more than that, she had discovered something about herself that she didn't know existed, an ability to remain calm and effective under the extreme pressure, and a willingness to risk everything for the soldiers who depended on her. The ceremony marking the end of Maya's deployment was attended by military leadership throughout the theater of operations. She was awarded the Silver Star for her actions during the compound assault, the Bronze Star with VER device for her performance during the convoy ambush, and several other decorations that recognized her exceptional service in combat.
But the moment that meant the most to Maya came when Patterson presented her with a custom case for the Barrett rifle, a case that bore an engraved plaque reading, "To Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, a warrior who understands that excellence is not just about what you can do, but about what you're willing to do for others." Patterson's speech during the ceremony was characteristic of the man, direct, honest, and focused on the essential qualities that made great soldiers great. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the assembled officers and enlisted personnel, "today we recognize a soldier who has demonstrated that excellence knows no boundaries of gender, background, or conventional expectation. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has proven that when we focus on ability, dedication, and moral courage, we find our finest warriors in places we might not have thought to look." He paused, looking directly at Maya as he continued. "But more than her exceptional marksmanship, more than her tactical intelligence, and more than her courage under fire, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has demonstrated the one quality that separates true warriors from merely competent soldiers: the absolute commitment to place the mission and her fellow soldiers ahead of her own safety."
Maya's response was characteristically humble and professional. "Sir, I was just doing my job. Every soldier here would have done the same thing under the same circumstances." Patterson's smile was knowing and proud. "Rodriguez, that's exactly why you're the soldier you are. You don't see what you do as extraordinary because your standards are so high that excellence has become routine for you. That's the mark of a true professional." As Maya prepared to leave Afghanistan and return to the United States, she carried with her not just the Barrett rifle that had become such an important part of her identity, but also the knowledge that she had been tested in the crucible of combat and had not been found wanting. She had proven to herself and to others that skill, dedication, and moral courage could overcome any obstacle and earn respect in the most demanding environments imaginable. The story of Maya Rodriguez and Patterson's Barrett .50 rifle became part of military legend, told in training courses, leadership seminars, and wherever soldiers gathered to discuss what it meant to be a warrior. But for Maya herself, the story was not about recognition or awards, or even about the exceptional weapon that she had been privileged to carry into combat. For Maya, the story was about the moment when she realized that being a soldier was not just about following orders or demonstrating technical competence. It was about understanding that some things are worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, and worth dedicating your life to protecting. It was about the moment when she understood that true leadership is not about rank or position, but about the willingness to do what needs to be done, regardless of the personal cost. Maya Rodriguez returned to the United States with a reputation as one of the finest snipers in military history, but more importantly, she returned with an understanding of what it meant to be part of something greater than herself. She had learned that excellence is not a destination, but a journey, and that the true measure of a warrior is not in the enemies they defeat, but in the lives they save and the standards they set for those who follow. The Barrett .50 rifle remained with Maya throughout the rest of her military career, serving as both a tool and a reminder of the responsibility that comes with exceptional capability. And whenever young soldiers asked her about the secret to becoming an elite warrior, her answer was always the same: master your craft, serve your mission, and never forget that the greatest victory is bringing your fellow soldiers home alive. Lieutenant Colonel James Iron Mike Patterson's decision to hand his .50 to Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez and tell her to show them what a real shot looks like became more than just a story about exceptional marksmanship under combat conditions. It became a testament to the power of recognizing excellence wherever it appears, and the importance of passing on not just weapons and equipment, but wisdom, responsibility, and the uncompromising standards that make great warriors great. In the end, Maya's story was not just about a female soldier proving herself in a male-dominated profession, or about exceptional marksmanship under combat conditions, or even about the specific battles she fought in the mountains of Afghanistan. It was about the timeless military virtues of courage, competence,
and commitment to something greater than oneself, virtues that define great warriors regardless of their background, their gender, or the era in which they serve. And somewhere in the military today, there are young soldiers learning to shoot, learning to fight, and learning what it means to be a warrior. When they hear Maya's story, when they learn about the day a commander handed his most precious weapon to a young soldier and told her to show them what a real shot looks like, they understand that excellence is not about where you come from or what others expect of you. Excellence is about what you're willing to become when everything depends on it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.